skills again by him. Oh, marvellous goal by Röhl.
Welcome to the Rangers Journey.
Evening folks, and welcome back to Rangers Journal. I'm Scotty, and tonight we're going to talk about one of the big questions around about Ibrox just now. Should Danny Rohl bring in a Scottish coach or a Rangers fan or ex-player into his backroom team? There's been a lot of chat about adding that homegrown influence, someone who really gets what Rangers means. So tonight we're going to be looking at 5 names that we've picked individually: Billy Dodds, Neil McCann, Jermaine Defoe, Lee McCulloch and Ian Murray. And tonight I'm joined by a top panel to break it all down. Laura bringing a calm but cutting takes. Doug, the tactical mind, who's probably got his notes ready, spreadsheet open, and John, the passionate voice of the fans, will no doubt keep us honest tonight. Let's get into it. Laura, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Aye, not bad at all. Doug, how are you, pal?
Yeah, not doing bad, thanks.
Not doing too bad. Good. John, how are you getting on?
Yep, all good, thanks. Rangers aren't ruining my weekends just now, so happy days.
Aye, it's definitely a plus, isn't it? It's definitely a plus just now. Right, so we're just going to get right into it. I'm going to talk about Neil McCann first, because we've only got Laura for half an hour, and we can just kind of go from there. Doug, can you pull up Neil McCann for me, mate? So, speak about his pros first, right? He's a good communicator. We all know how good he is in terms of being on telly, punditry, all that type of stuff. He can talk about the game relatively well. Laura, why did you go with Neil McCann?
Oh, sorry, Scott. My audio is way behind. Sorry, can you ask me that again? Sorry, I'm really struggling with this audio.
That's okay. Why Neil McCann?
So, Neil McCann, probably because of, his Rangers background. I think he's quite a bit of a fan favourite as well. I've watched him back actually. Obviously, I think he's a great player, great guy. But I think the club really has to do something for the fan now, and I think somebody like Neil McCann would be a really good choice.
Well, he's obviously got the advantage that he was in around the players kind of last season. He's got some experience there with Inverness, Cali, Dundee, Dunfermline. Is there anything that kind of stands out about Neil McCann for you? Doug, I'll come to you on that one, mate. Is there anything about Neil McCann that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Neil's probably one of the standout candidates in the list, because I think he's got a little bit of everything. Obviously, as we've got under the credentials, an extensive playing career. He won 10 major trophies, 9 of which were with us. So this is a player that knows how to win, and win continuously. He was a great player, tricky winger. He brought a lot to the team. And obviously he's got a bit of managerial experience in there as well. So when you add all that together, his stint coaching recently with the club, so he's obviously had some time with the club, not just back then but now. So he's got a really good mix of things there, and he talks really well, which communication for a coach, communication is the biggest, in my opinion anyway. It's going to be the biggest trick in your arsenal. It's all very well having all the badges, knowing all the stuff, having all the experience, but if you can't translate that to players and in ways that they can understand and then obviously replicate themselves, then you're not going to get very far. And he comes across as someone who is good at communicating. He talks well. I think he's done some agent work and stuff also. So, there's a lot of communicative stuff going on in there. So, yeah, I think he's a good mix of things. And like I say, the fact that for me, he seems like he'd be a really strong communicator puts him, as I say, near the top of this list, in my opinion.
John, what about you?
I really like Neil McCann. I think something we've spoken about before is winners, guys who know how to get the job done. And for somebody who's lived through successful periods, but also through some barren periods as a player here, I think he can pull on that. I think he's been in and around the game in Scottish football as well. Some of the people we're probably going to talk about haven't been close to Scottish football of recent, so maybe not understanding everything that's going on. Neil McCann's there and thereabouts, week in, week out. I think he's a great shout. I think he'd be a great candidate. One I would certainly be very happy with coming in, if that's the case.
That's fair. That's fair. For me, on Neil McCann, it's one I'm open to. It's one I'm open to be brutally honest with you. Doug, I want to come to you on what you thought kind of role he had under Barry Ferguson.
I would have thought it was probably fairly tactical, given his managerial obviously experience, and I think he was probably the closest one to being the actual assistant manager. I imagine Dodds was a bit more general coaching, although I mean it could have been either or. Dodds obviously has plenty of management experience himself, but we sort of heard, I think, stuff about Dodds doing some work with the strikers and work on set pieces and things like that. So I would imagine that Neil McCann was probably, as I say, coaching, and maybe a bit of the physical stuff as well, because Neil McCann, obviously a very fit player, looked after himself well in that regard. So I would imagine that he probably took a lot of the drills and did a lot of the actual work alongside Dodds while Barry was sort of watching over everything.
John, do you think that Neil McCann would be a good link between the fans and the team just now?
I think so. I think given he was there last season, he's seen some of the things that have gone on. I think for the majority of us as well, we do relate Neil McCann to a successful period and winning trophies. So I think he's got that in his favour. From a coaching side of things, I think he's got it all there. But yeah, I think he's got that in terms of that link. He gives us somebody that we know as a familiar face. He's been here. I think seeing it recently, he knows how bad it's been. So we're not going back to somebody from maybe 10, 15 years ago who's not been in and around the club. He's been around the club 6 months ago. He knows the problems that were then. He can probably compare what was going on then to what's going on now and say, right, what still needs to be fixed and how can we do that? So that's why I think it works for me.
Aye, fair enough. It's an interesting call. Doug, would you be happy with it if Neil McCann was the one?
Yeah, be perfectly happy with him. Like I say, I think he's got a mix of stuff. Like you say, he's a known winner. He knows what it takes to get results at the club, and not just get results, but as I say, doing it repeatedly as well. 9 trophies is a really good, haul, and as I say, he's obviously got the coaching knowledge and everything. So yeah, I'd be perfectly happy with him.
Fair enough. We've even got just good evening to everybody for joining. Smash a like button for us. We've even got a suggestion about Brian Laudrup to come in as a third coach. That would be something. Moving on to the next one. I'm going to get back to the start now. Right. Billy Dodds, this guy's my pick. So I've decided to go with Billy Dodds because I think within Rangers we need this Jimmy Nicholl type mould, the experienced head. We've seen, I think he was the most effective coach in Barry's coaching staff because you could see the difference he made on set pieces. No, there wasn't really a style of play. It was all about instilling a mentality when Barry was in charge. But quite evidently, you could see Dessers was confident, happy. He's been a manager in his own right. As I say, I'm going to refer back to set pieces again. The set pieces were outstanding under Barry last season. He's got all the experience that's needed to fulfill the role. Quickly get through his slides. So Dundee United, Queen of South, Dundee, East Fife, Queen of South again, Ross County, 2 spells at Cali Thistle and then at Rangers. Now he's been an assistant, he's been a coach, he's been a manager. He's done it all. He's done it all across all levels of the game. And that's mash out, because I think he would come in and he would fix the set pieces. I still think the set pieces are a massive, massive problem in at Rangers just now. John, I'm going to come to you first. What's your opinion on Billy Dodds?
He's definitely got the experience. Until looking at the slide, actually, I hadn't realised how far back his kind of coaching career went. It seems a bit more modern in terms of that. A lot of good experience in different roles, so good variety of what he's had to do. And the thing that sprung to me was Dessers, the change he's seen with Dessers at points when he was working with him last season. It would be slightly different in terms, I think we've all thought of more modern Rangers players and more people who are a bit more in the media spotlight. So I think he brings a good coaching side, a good football knowledge side to it. Again, I think most of these I'm probably going to sit here tonight and say I don't really have too many concerns about, especially the guys who were there last season. They've seen the good and the bad. So, something I'd be up for. Wouldn't be totally against it at all.
Could I maybe speak you into him before Neil McCann? Who would you prefer with the two of them?
I'd always thought about Neil McCann first, but looking at that experience in the different roles, I could probably see why you would go with Dodds ahead of McCann.
Fair. We're friend of the pod, Ross Clark. He's got his own podcast now with Davey, and it is the Blues Brother podcast. Head on over and subscribe to their channel for me. It's great content and it's a real laugh as well. He was saying he was part of a management team. It was brutal last year. But Ross, on evidence, you're looking at the set pieces in the park. That's what he was in charge of, and I think he done a good job on it. Doug, I'm going to come to you now. Billy Dodds, mate.
Yeah, again, I mean, you can apply a lot of what I said about Neil McCann to Billy Dodds. He didn't win quite as much with us, but still a very good player, and sometimes underrated as well, because obviously he played for us under Advocat when we had literal world class players in our team, and still contributed. So again, he knows what it's like to play with players at the top level of our game. One of the things I like about Dodds is he strikes me as a little bit of a coisty kind of character as well. He's got a little bit of banter about him. He's a little bit more playful, I think, and sometimes that can be useful. I think when you're in high pressure environments, having that person there that can sometimes just break the tension a little bit during training or after the manager's done the hard lines maybe, or had to put the foot down. You've got someone there that kind of comes in and does this more softly stuff. And I feel like he could offer a bit of that. Like you said, loads of experience there all the way back through loads of years. It's not actually mentioned in there, but just before he became assistant at Queen of the South, he was in the coaching team, and he coached the strikers. And that was the year 2008 when Queen of the South met us in the league. Was it the League Cup final, I think? So getting Queen of the South obviously no, it was the Scottish Cup, just pulled up there. 2008 Scottish Cup final. So obviously getting Queen of the South to a cup final is an achievement as part of that coaching team. As I say, I think again, he's another person that I think I'd be perfectly happy coming in. I know you've got someone mentioned there. He's part of a coaching team that maybe wasn't quite as successful as we want, but I think we need to account for the fact that there are still going to be other coaches with him. He is ultimately part of a team, and I think that there's things that he can bring to the current team that are positive, because remember, this role is very specifically about having that link to Rangers, having that link to Scotland, and kind of helping fill in some of those blanks that maybe Danny Rohl will have coming in from a sort of a more external point of view. And that's going to be a key part of this person's role. So we've got coaches and stuff there that are excuse me. We've got coaches already there that are maybe going to be more focused on some of the things that maybe the team he was in before weren't quite as good at. And obviously, ultimately, with the greatest respect to Barry Ferguson, who I love completely, he wasn't the best manager, and his career stipulates to that. He was there to do a job for a quick period of time. Danny Rohl's a totally different person in charge, and as I say, this coach is there to fill a very specific role, and so I don't think it's maybe quite as important that they're the best coach in the world. They need to have the ability, have the skills, and say most of these guys have got their UEFA Pro licenses, so they've demonstrated they've got the ability to coach. But this person is coming in, as I say, to fulfill that very particular role in knowledge, in terms of local knowledge and stuff like that. So I don't think we need to worry too much about the fact that he was part of a coaching team that maybe wasn't quite as good as we'd have liked at the time.
Curry, going to get yourself to doctors. It's the same thing that happens to you every year and you never do anything about it. You've probably got a chest infection, mate. Anyway, back to the pod. So, the other thing that is probably missed to that slide, see when Rangers played in the 2008 Scottish Cup final, I think Boyd scored the winner. We won 3-2. Billy Dodds was the interim manager for Queen South that day. He's took Inverness Cali to the final on a couple of occasions as well when he was in charge of them. He's got achievements within the game. But hey, that's just my plug for him. Just a quick one, lads. John, how do you think Neil McCann and Billy Dodds, if it was either or, would fit into the structure that Danny Rohl's got just now? Like, what would they bring to the coaching team?
I think for those two specifically, they bring the knowledge of Scottish football. They bring that, right? What does it mean to go to certain grounds? What does it mean to play against certain teams, whether that's home or away? Understanding the pressures that come with that, understanding the expectations for when we're going. We talk about, Ross County on a Tuesday night, round about Christmas. What does that mean? And the travel that goes with that. I think those two specifically bring that local knowledge. What does the league mean? What does the cups mean? How are the fans going to react to certain things? So I think that's what I'd be looking for from them. Filling in tactically, set pieces, bonuses all round for things like that, if they can bring real quality there.
Fair. Doug, what about you?
Yeah, everything that John said there. I mean, he if you've got one of them in there, they might be able to say to Rohl, maybe he's setting up the team. And let's say, for example, that the Celtic game that just passed, a lot of people thought that Rohl set up a little bit too defensively, and maybe you've got that guy there that's looking at that plan, and they might say to them, look, fans would rather you go and attack this game, and they'd probably rather you lost 3-2 but haven't gone all out and been amazing than go in defensively and end up being a little bit weak and losing. So maybe they can add little nuggets like that, or like John said, they're kind of set the scene for certain games and expectations. I mean, Danny Rohl feels to me like he's got his head in his shoulders, and I think he does kind of understand. But as I say, they can just really push the message. So if there is any moments where Rohl is not quite where he needs to be, or maybe not quite thinking the right way, they'll be the ones that would be like, no, this is how it is here, and it might be different to how it was for you at Munich and the pressure there. The pressure here is like this, and they can just kind of, as I say, smooth over those little wrinkles, because he's been at places that demand winning, but the demand that we have is slightly different, and they can kind of speak to that.
John, I'm going to hand over to you now, mate, and let's let you speak us through Jermaine Defoe.
So I've went down a slightly different route here. I've focused a little less on a local coach and more about potentially what Jermaine Defoe could bring as a coach for the footballing side of things. And I've got 2 points of reference for this. One is Calvin Bassey, the other is Nico Raskin. Both of those players, their games took a jump up when we brought in a manager who played their position. Bassey went up levels when Van Bronckhorst came in. He'd experienced left back, Champions League, World Cup finals. Raskin last season, Barry Ferguson came in, and you've seen that level of jumping up. We have a striker problem right now, big time. And I think going forward, scoring goals is the most important thing for this team. To me, someone like Defoe, could he come in and perhaps unlock something in our strikers, give them that advice, that experience that he's had, played at the very top? We've spent a huge amount of money on Shamiti. Whether any of us think he's ever going to be good enough or not, that's up for debate. But can we give him the tools to try and help him get to that level? And could somebody like Jermaine Defoe cross that bridge of, he's a link with the fans in terms of playing for the club, he's a link to recent success, he's had a great career. And does he have the coaching skills for that? Now that is up for debate. I don't know enough of him as what he's achieved in the game as a coach right now and worked with him or anything like that. But I think looking at the coaching a little differently with this, in terms of local knowledge, why don't we put Stephen Smith to good use? He's there. He had a little shot getting promoted up into the first team. Start to give a pathway for him. Use him as the local knowledge in terms of what's the game's going to be like, what we're talking about there with Dodds and McCann, and actually bring in a coach who could do the coaching side of it and say, here's how we help the players. So that was my thinking behind Defoe and what I hoped somebody like that could bring.
Doug, what about you, pal?
Well, when you popped it in the group chat that we'd be talking about Defoe, my first reaction was, can we sign him as a player, please? I still think you'd probably do a better job than some of what we have. But seriously, I think just immediately someone in the comments there said, oh, he'll not come if he's not come with Gerrard. I don't believe that. I think Jermaine Defoe has talked a lot since he left about how much he fell in love with Rangers and how much he kind of got it. This is a player who, I think at times throughout his career was underrated as to just how good of a striker he was. He played, a lot of different clubs, but didn't necessarily win the trophies that sometimes players of his quality deserve. I've sort of talked in the past that, that's something that we can offer players sometimes, either early in their career or indeed, like for Jermaine, later in their career, the chance to win things. And obviously he came up here and did that. So he's kind of got that knowledge of the club in terms of its more modern context, that need to win. He was here at, our most successful sort of period, that 2000, between sort of 2019 and 2022. So, he's seen us at our best, whilst also seeing the club still at the kind of level we are now. So he's got that understanding coming in, and could, as I say, help I think to push players to that extra level. Like John said, we've got strikers that could really use the kind of knowledge that he has. Now, Jermaine Defoe, I think, is one of those players who he just naturally has it. And sometimes that can be difficult to teach, because ultimately, if you've just got it, you've got it, and you can't necessarily teach that. But he's still going to have experiences and skills that he can pass on. Particularly, we've talked about it loads of times. Jermaine scored one of the best goals I've ever seen at Ibrox, where was it Livingston? I think it was, and it was just the absolute definition of a perfect first touch. And that's something that Chimity, I think, could learn a little bit of, because his touch can be a wee bit wayward now and again. So he does lack experience. There is that. Obviously, you see there, he started just coaching with us. He's taken on a youth role at Tottenham, so he's not done an awful lot. But again, I think he's the type of guy who, he'll be hungry to develop himself as a coach. I know he's got aspirations to be a manager, because he wants to kind of help push the success of black managers by sort of helping to forge that career himself. So he'd be coming with aspirations to do the best that he can, so that he can obviously progress his career. So I think that would be the kind of offset to that lack of experience, is the drive, and then having, as I say, that career of excellence to kind of fall back on. Again, he's not going to be the main coach that we have, so we've got other people there for that. But I think the things he can bring, particularly obviously in that striking department, I think Danilo would probably work quite well with Defoe as well. So I think there's lots of benefits to have there. He's maybe just, as I say, he'd be a great coach for all those reasons. But if we were to bring him in, I'd probably also want us to bring in someone else to still fill that Scottish gap. But he'd be an absolutely great person to have around the place.
Aye, some very good points there. For me, the pros is he's young, he's active with young ideas, etc. But my argument would be we've already got a young manager, so hence why I would probably go with more down the Dodds route. I'd probably prefer Billy Dodds for the experience, because I think that's what we need. We need somebody with a knowledge of the Scottish game that's been round the block, and Dodds has got the most experience of everybody. Doug, I'm going to come on to one of yours now. I think, right, Lee McCulloch, go for it.
Yeah, so when I was trying to think of people, I sort of tried to think of a couple more out of the box choices. The first person, I must admit, the first person that came to mind was Kevin Thompson, but I feel like we've talked about him a lot, on the pod, and I know there's a lot of fans that would be a fan of him coming in as well. But I thought we would take the opportunity to discuss some other options, and Lee McCulloch was one that came to mind. Again, he's a player with extensive experience. He played for a long time down in England as well, going all the way up the kind of levels with Wigan. I think they were in the League Two when he signed for them initially. Certainly they were, if not that, League One, and kind of came up the levels with them into the Premier League. Obviously, you can see there he's got a really extensive coaching career going back the last 10 years. That's actually started with ourselves, working with Kenny McDowell for a short stint. Then obviously periods at Kilmarnock, a little bit of time abroad, and then more recently with Dundee United and Hearts. He's currently scouting for Brighton, which I think is also, although he's not been there for particularly long, again, just to have an experience of that environment, I think is a plus. He could probably take some things from that and teach us a few things, given how well Brighton scout. So he's maybe got a bit of knowledge, inside knowledge he could bring to us there. Whether he wants to get back into coaching, I don't know. But as I say, I think he's got a lot of experience, and obviously, again, a player that's won trophies with the club at multiple levels. Again, he's obviously stuck with us during the darkest period, so he's got the loyalty. And something that I think puts him in good stead as for being a coach as well is McCulloch is a guy that I think played pretty much everywhere except goalkeeper. He was all over the place. He spent obviously his period at Wigan. He was mostly a right mid. He played centre back for us. He played full backs at times. He played up front. So he's played all across the pitch. So he kind of knows it from all angles in terms of being a player. So again, I think that's beneficial as a coach, particularly if you are going to be maybe more of a general coach, which I think, as I say, this role probably would be. And then again, it's all about having that experience. So he's been at multiple Scottish clubs. So he's got the experience of Scottish football, the experience of Rangers. So again, he can bring all those things. The only thing that maybe goes against him is, as I say, he's maybe not got quite as much managerial experience in terms of long term in the main job, unlike say Billy Dodds. But like Neil McCanny, he's got a bit more of maybe a broader brush. So yeah, so it's just something that I thought I would bring in. Something that's not really been touched on that I thought, again, potentially ticks a lot of those boxes in terms of the link to Scottish football, the link to Rangers, knowing how to win, and having a lot of experience, and those things that obviously make the club tick.
Definitely, mate. That's an actually really interesting suggestion. I like the variety in his coaching experience. It's very similar to Billy Dodds, and he is younger. He's 47. Obviously, he's at Brighton just now as a scout. Don't know kind of where that would take us, but I like a bit of variety, and he's certainly bringing it. John, what do you reckon about Lee McCulloch?
This suggestion blew me out the water earlier because it came out of left field and I'd not even thought about it. I think it's a great shout. An ex-captain, been here through the darkest of times. Real variety in terms of experience. Clubs in Scotland, the scouting role just now. I think he would bring a real personality to the place as well, but at the same time, a kind of calm personality that I think would work well with Röhl and his team. You get the passion, but it feels like with Lee McCulloch, there was always a measured side to him as well. It wasn't just all out, kind of aggression and passion. So I think he could bring a calming nature to it, a really good kind of side to it. This almost jumps above Dawes and McCann to me, which is kind of saying something and consider how I started the pod. I think it's different. I think there's a lot of really interesting experiences there that could work really well with Danny Röhl.
It's a fair shout. It definitely is a fair shout. I think the comments are quite happy about it as well, going by what the guys in the chat are saying. On to the last one that we're going to speak about, and it is a surprise one. Doug, this is one of your guys again, Ian Murray.
McCulloch was my left field choice. This is my left field choice. I have to put my cards on the table. I didn't think of him on my own. McCulloch was someone that I kind of came to mind because I kind of remembered, he managed at Kilmarnock. What else did he do? And then I went and looked at him and thought, actually, yeah, he's a good choice. Ian Murray came up when I was just kind of Googling about who are good Scottish coaches. And I found a couple of things, a couple of write-ups about him that just sort of made me think he could have some potential, particularly from the sort of the more coaching side. So again, he's obviously been with the club, so he's got that experience. He's not quite got the same pedigree as at the club as some of the others, but still got that experience. And obviously, he played for Hibs over 2 stints, he captained Hibs as well. So, again, kind of got that kind of leadership and those types of qualities. He's been a manager. He's probably got the most managerial experience out of everyone we've spoken about, although it is all mostly lower level. But at some decent clubs, Raith Rovers, Airdrie, St Mirren are all, the Barn are all decent clubs. And he's spent a reasonable amount of time at the majority of them, and a little sort of short stint outside the country as well, which I'm always a fan of. I think it's something that I'm in terms of looking at sort of Scotland. I really like that we're seeing so many young Scottish players playing abroad, because I think if you go abroad, it just gives you that extra little boost to your career and your outlook and thinking about the game, learning about different points of views and things like that. So I like when people have got that sort of stint abroad. But the thing that kind of caught my eye that I just thought made it worth just throwing him in there for a bit of fun was he seems to have a lot of good write-ups in terms of working with players and building teams. He did quite well with, as I say, these kind of teams that he had. They weren't, great teams. He didn't have, great players at his disposal, but he sort of managed to make them into good units. He's meant to have decent man management skills and fostered like a real cultural development and trying to develop players and grow, which obviously at those kind of lower levels, I think is really key. You have to work with a lot of younger players because you can't afford necessarily to buy others. And it was those kind of things about, stabilising teams, building squads, and building that kind of development culture that I was just sort of reading them all and going, that really chimes with me in terms of things that we need right now. And so he'd maybe have some benefits in that respect. As I say, he is, I think, the last choice out of all these. I'm not trying to play him as some kind of MasterCard out of nowhere, but as I say, I just thought he was an interesting shout. To say someone that, as I say, obviously been at the club, decent career, and as I say, has some decent write-ups in terms of his actual coaching ability.
Definitely, Doug. He's got a very good CV, if you ask me. And he's got a good reputation within the game as well. I think it would be quite a smart move by Rangers if they were to do this. Whether he's in a position where he's going to apply for it or not is a different thing. Or whether he's going to get spoke to, it's a different thing. John, where are you at on? What's your thoughts on Ian Murray?
I think he brings a lot of managerial experience. So obviously, Röhl's just moving from his second managerial job in over the last couple of years. So that's somebody who's come in with a lot of manager experience in the recent past, and through the leagues as well. So there's not just in one league facing against the same teams all the time. There's variety there in terms of the teams he's managed and the leagues he's been in. He certainly knows the club well enough, and certainly knows Scottish football very well. My concern would possibly be the link with the fans. I don't think there's maybe that strength or link that some of the other guys mentioned would have, and maybe certain aspects of the fans that might think, not really too sure about this. That would maybe be my one concern if you're looking somebody for the fans to get on board with straight away. But I think I agree with Doug. Of everybody kind of mentioned here, he's probably at the bottom of the list for tonight.
Right, it's interesting. We've got a few suggestions in the comments, but I'm going to come round these one last time. So the four we've spoke about, or the five we've spoke about, sorry, Neil McCann, Billy Dodds, Ian Murray, Jermaine Defoe, and Lee McCulloch. Doug, who's your choice for the role if it's out of them five in the running?
I mean, I would be happy with any of Dodds, McCulloch, or McCann. So all three of them would make me perfectly happy. It's similar, some of the guys that have been mentioned in the comments. Stephen Davis has popped up quite a lot. He'd be a really interesting, not really got a lot of coaching experience, but obviously a really interesting option. Amazing career, both here and down south, so would have so much to give to players in that respect. Kevin Thompson, obviously a really good shout as well. But I think for me, I think maybe Dodds just edges it. He's got more experience. I really like Neil McCann, but I think Dodds' experience, John touched on it there, and it's something that I hadn't thought about too much myself, but having someone that's got a solid base of managerial experience, I think would help because of Rohl's inexperience in that regard. So that would be of benefit. I think McCulloch brings that as well over McCann, who's, although he's had a couple of managerial stints, they've all been really short. So I think that kind of puts him slightly behind. So it really depends on what obviously Rohl wants primarily from this guy. If he's wanting someone that's more tactical and maybe going to be a bit more about thinking on the game, then I'd be going Neil McCann. If he's looking for someone that's just got a bit more managerial experience and that Scottish pedigree and breadth of experience, then I think Dodds and McCulloch fit that role. So I'm going to go. I'm going to say Lee McCulloch. I'll pick my own guy. Lee McCulloch as the surprise shout. Yeah, because I really like Lee McCulloch. I'm a big fan of him as a player. So yeah, let's go Lee McCulloch.
Fair enough. For me, it's Billy Dodds or Darren. I think experience. He's the best all rounder that's in amongst it. He's at almost Jimmy Nicholl level head of experience. He's not quite as old as what Jimmy Nicholl was when he came to his under Graham Murray, but for Billy Dodds is a no-brainer for me. John, what about you, bud?
Probably sticking with Jermaine Defoe, who was my shout, but I think on the provision that we look to promote Stevie Smith within this framework and give Stevie Smith more of a role and say, right, you bring the Scottish knowledge. We're bringing Jermaine Defoe in for a specific kind of footballing and coaching reason. Something I've maybe posed back here is, when we're talking about this coach, should we be thinking about somebody who could in the long term possibly take on the manager's job?
Sorry, this laptop's a pest. Aye, 100%. I think we do need to start doing that eventually, to be honest, because if the worst comes to us, we need somebody to step in as an interim. So, Who's there just
Well,
now apart from Stevie Smith?
in that case, do we start to talk about people like Rhys McCabe, younger coaches like that coming into the setup behind some of these guys?
You could. That's a bit of a curveball. My worry with a young coach coming in, John, is we've got a young coach as a manager. I think he needs that kind of. It's almost like when St Mirren appointed a manager years and years ago, and they appointed Tommy Craig, and he went in as assistant. Tommy Craig was like mid-60s at the time, but he'd been running a block, and we need that type of appointment for me. You need that old head to say, no, this is the way Motherwell set up, this is the way Dundee United play. You need to watch a big right back, the big strikers done this season, etc., etc. You need somebody like that for me. Doug, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting prospect. The idea of kind of building in that succession plan. Obviously, we saw it work to spectacular effect with Souness and Smith, so it's definitely something that's doable. I think I would be tempted to try, and if we were going to try and do something like that, that would be maybe a good way to bring in someone like, Robinson from St Mirren, who is maybe at that point where you're looking at them going, he seems like a really solid coach, but is St Mirren to Rangers too big a step to make all at once? Because you'd maybe, obviously, if you're looking at people in the league, McInnes is that obvious choice because he's got the experience. He's led clubs at the top end of the table. And he's kind of like the McLeish of today, if you'd like to put it in that sort of format. So, if you're looking at someone like Robinson, who you're going, yeah, he's a good coach. He's shown a lot of really good things, but is that step too much? Maybe you try and coax him in and go, and look, do you want to come in as assistant? And the idea that we have is, we're bringing you in now as assistant behind Danny Röhl. You can learn from him as well, he's worked at big clubs and things like that. You get your foot in the door here, and then the idea is, all being well, Danny Röhl wins a bunch of stuff with Rangers, and someone else from a bigger league comes in, tempts him away, and then we can elevate you into the top position. Then I'd probably look to do something, or I would like to see them do something like that if we were going to try that.
Also a fair point. John, I'm going to come to you on Maurice Ross. That is one of the comments has been quite popular tonight. Mitch says about him. What would your thoughts be on Maurice Ross? Obviously, he's kind of come out of Woodward a wee bit recently. He's been on Rangers TV a wee bit more. He's been known within the media a wee bit more as well. Would you be disappointed if it was him?
I think over some of the other candidates we're talking about, perhaps. I think the coaching experience, I totally get what you're saying in terms of having a more experienced coach in there. If you're looking for that solid kind of right hand, I think something like that would probably pique my interest more than Maurice Ross. Certainly seems to know a lot around the coaching side of things, seems to talk a good game around the coaching side of things and tactics and whatnot, certainly from what I've heard of him in RTV and things. Not sure. I think I've maybe still got the fear because he was spoken about when Russell Martin was in place, and I think maybe that clouds the judgment ever so slightly.
Of course it does, mate. Doug, what about you, Maurice?
Yeah, Maurice Ross is a really interesting one. He's had a really interesting career. I mean, both football-wise and managerial. He didn't really ever settle anywhere as a player. I think his longest stint player-wise was with us. But I mean, he played for a whole bunch of clubs after. I'm sure he was in China for a little bit, and then his managerial career is mostly been abroad. So again, I mean, I'm a fan of that. It was in mostly smaller nations. I think he was in Norway, and I think he might have been in the Faroe Islands as well. So he was in sort of smaller places, but I still think there's a lot to take from, as I say, coaching abroad and getting those experiences. His coaching career, I think it's been a little bit bitty for my liking, though. He joined Notts County, but he wasn't there for very long, and I think he's at Fleetwood right now, is it? I think. So again, kind of more lower level. So it's that similar kind of thing to Ian Murray. That step up going to be something he can do, but. And he's another left field choice, I think, is an interesting one. I do think there's better candidates ultimately for me. But as I say, an interesting guy again. Knows the club, but not to the same extent as the guys like McCann, McCulloch, Dodds. These are guys that were at the club longer, won more, so I think they've just got that bit more to offer. I think ultimately to Danny Rohl in terms of the advisory things that he's probably going to want from them. But yeah, interesting shout though. Interesting shout.
Definitely. Smoke, I think the appointment's happening over the international break. I'm sure Danny Rohl says that, or I read it somewhere. John, Stephen Davis.
I must admit, I thought that was going to be one of the slides for tonight. I thought he was maybe one of the obvious ones. To me, Stephen Davis would fit around the Jermaine Defoe mould. Somebody you're looking to come in and coach the players. You're not focused in on his local knowledge of the game in Scotland because he's slightly removed from it. If we're looking at promoting like a Stevie Smith for the local knowledge, bringing in a coach, Stephen Davis, Jermaine Defoe, those guys are great shouts for me. I think his experience in terms of his country, in terms of captain in Northern Ireland, how he's played for us, winning mentality, ticks a lot of boxes. Which, just back to that, what you want from him? What do you want him to do?
100%. Doug, I'm going to come to you on Stephen Davis in a wee minute. I just want to answer this one about Billy Davies. I know he's at Morton, and I know he's doing a kind of technical, managerial sort of role. It's a role I've never heard of before, but I think he's been out of the game a wee bit too long for me in terms of coming in as a coach at Rangers. I'm unsure where Billy Davies would fit in that setup. I think he's probably in his rightful place at Morton just now until he gets a managerial gig somewhere. So, Doug, come to you on Stephen Davis and Kevin Thompson.
Yeah, in terms of Stephen Davis, I mean, obviously, absolutely massive player, huge amount of experience for both in Scotland and down south, and obviously for his country. So, the amount that he'd have to teach players and young players in particular, there's nobody in this list that has more. I think, as I say, obviously played in the Premiership, so he's played at pretty much the highest level in that regard as well. The sort of just the glaring thing is that, as far as I'm aware, he's not really got any coaching experience. Obviously, other than he was the manager for 2 matches, so 50% win rate. So yeah, that's a plus. But yeah, I think that's probably the big Achilles heel there would be his lack of experience just as a coach. I don't think he's really done any coaching, as far as I'm aware. But again, that might not necessarily be a massive problem depending on what the main things Rohl is looking for. If Rohl's happy that he's got the coaching experience, which obviously he's got 2 very experienced coaches with him, so if he's happy with that, then he could still look at it and go, this is a guy with top level experience, played for Rangers during a hugely successful spell, and a more difficult spell. So he's got sort of that dual kind of experience of the club. Obviously, huge amounts of international experience as well. So he's got so much that he can bring to the club in that regard. And then the stuff about what it means to play for Rangers. I mean, obviously a Rangers fan as well. So he's got all that. And that may be, as I say, more important to Rohl than the coaching side. I think ultimately he probably will want both. So I think that'll be the one thing that holds him back, his lack of coaching experience. In terms of Kevin Thompson, Kevin Thompson does have a kind of both. He's obviously not got the career that Stephen Davis does, but he still had a really good career with ourselves. Was it Middlesbrough that he went down to afterwards? Went and bringing up his curious to remind me here. So down to Middlesbrough afterwards, and then obviously came back up again, back to Hibs, Dundee. So plenty of experience across Scotland, a bit of experience down south as well. He's a really well thought of young coach, working with a lot of young players. He's obviously been within the Rangers setup in the sort of immediate past as well, so that's a plus. And obviously we've had him on the pod a couple of times. He speaks really well. He comes across to me as really intelligent, in that same kind of way that McCann does when he speaks. So again, someone who's got a lot to offer, and I think Kevin Thompson, although his experience sort of pales in comparison to Steve Davis's, it's still a solid level of experience, and he's also got perhaps more of the coaching stuff to bring to the table as well.
John, I'm going to wrap up with this last question for JD, and he's saying it's interesting because how young Danny Rohl is. Do we want wisdom? Do you want more of a youthful energy? What type of personality will work with Rohl? What do you think?
Good question.
Correct question.
Yeah, I think if we take a step back, I think wisdom is probably where we're at just now. An older head to lean on, somebody who Rohl can bounce things off of around the game in Scotland, around Rangers. And I think that's why. I think partly as well is why Lee McCullough came out of left field a little bit and seemed quite good, because he does have a wee bit more experience on him. Doesn't necessarily need to be in a manager's job, but he does have that experience around the Scottish game. So I think as much as youthful energy and new coaching ideas could be great in the longer term, for what Danny Röhl probably reached right now, wisdom and experience fits the bill, I would say.
Doug, what about you, bud?
I mean, why not? Why can't you have both? Like Ali McCoist isn't young, but I don't think anyone would say he doesn't have youthful energy. And I kind of hinted at that about Billy Dodds. You can get youthful energy from older people. So you don't necessarily it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. But I would agree that I think he's a younger coach, and this was something that I've said in the past that I admired about Steven Gerrard when he came in, because he came in and looked at the job and said, like, this is a huge job, and I'm an amateur manager. I need experience, and he surrounded himself with experienced people and people that were really good at their job. So Michael Beale was known as a really good coach, a really good tactician. So he had him in. He had the experience of a Gary McAllister and the other people he had around him. And so I think, again, this is another thing that I like about Danny Rohl, is that, he's come, not just in here, but obviously he did this same thing at Sheffield Wednesday. He's come in and went, I've got things I can learn. And there we go. He's coming into his positions and going, I'm coming into these roles as an outsider, someone who doesn't know necessarily the histories of the clubs and the ins and outs of the clubs. And that's something that I think is beneficial to learn, which I think is a great thing to have. So obviously he did that with Chris Powell, and he's looking to do that here. So for me, the biggest thing kind of outside the choice itself is the fact that Danny Rohl is smart enough to know he doesn't know everything, and know that he needs to build people around him to help give him a platform for success. And as you say, all these people we've talked about, they've all got various characteristics, and I think almost all of them could do a job. The big thing, we've got our points of views as to what we like and what we think are beneficial. And as I say, I agree with John. I think probably because Rohl is a younger manager, I think going for someone that has a bit more of experience behind them probably brings more benefit to him. But ultimately, it's about having trust in Danny Rohl and Danny Rohl to be sitting there going, what do I need? And then he'll obviously pick the person that he thinks will be able to provide that to him. And again, I consider it a really good mark a manager and something that gives me faith in Rohl to be a success. That, again, similar to Gerrard, he's coming in, and I think, this really is the complete opposite to what we had with Russell Martin, coming in going, I don't have all the answers, and I will need to bring people in to help me with those answers, because that's the mark of a truly intelligent person. Really intelligent people know that they need help with something somewhere. You might be great with maths and figures but terrible with people, or you might be great with people but terrible at figures and tactics. No one's great at absolutely everything. So the real mark for me is that, as I say, he's taking these steps to do this, and as I say, all these people will bring something to the role, and it'll every time I say something to the role, I just immediately then think Danny Rohl. So yeah, I think I would agree though ultimately with John. I think I think the beneficial thing, similar to what Gerrard did, is bring some experience in behind you to help fill in the things that you don't know, and particularly the things you don't know about Scottish football.
Yep, definitely, lads. Well, I think that's enough for this on the subject for tonight. This podcast was brought to you by the Bluebells Bar in Puerto del Carmen, Lanzarote. If you're in Puerto del Carmen, please head on over, drop the journal's name, say hello to your Kenny. There's loads and loads going on. It shows all the Rangers matches on the go. It's good food, good service. There's party nights. There's all sorts going on. So please head on over if you're in Puerto del Carmen. John, thanks for joining me tonight, mate.
Thank you very much. Really good chat, guys.
Doug, thanks again for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
Right, folks, that will sum up the pod. That will close up the pod lovely for the night. So please, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're watching on our platform, please head on over to YouTube and hit the like and subscribe button. It certainly all does help. We've got our membership podcast as well, which are up for 99p a month, where you'll get 3 extra pods at least a week. So apart from that, we'll be back tomorrow night at 9:30 for your Q&A, and we'll see you then. Cheers.
Every night is the Rangers Journal night.